might find the amount of clay that I'm using here a little bit surprising for making a teacup, but in fact I'm going to make several cups, and I'm using a method called throwing off the hump, and this actually is a faster method than individually weighing up a small ball of clay for each cup. And it's also rather a nice way to work when you're working on something small. It brings the work up higher and you're not so bent over the wheel. Centering a large amount of clay on the wheel is actually fairly simple to do if you use this coning up method. And the only real effort is right at the base of the cone, where you're pulling in the clay quite firmly, but as you come up here there's much less pressure, and it's a push forward rather than a push down which brings the cone back down again. This is the last pull up. I've actually thrown 3 other cups now, and so this is a little bit later on, but we're pulling up and forming a doorknob of clay before starting making the cup. Giving the base of the cup really good compression here. There's nothing very solid under the work because I'm throwing off the hump rather than on the wheel head, so compression is extra important, otherwise you end up with cracks in the base of the cup when it's drying. The hand position throwing off the hump I use is quite different to normal throwing off the wheel head. I tend to do a lot of the work in the top left hand side rather than working on the right hand side. Very light finger pressure is used. You're really coaxing the clay to shape. I further expand the form using a wooden rib, and it's adding some compression at the same time and also getting rid of slurry. Don't want the clay to be too wet. I don't actually use very much water when I'm throwing. Finish this off with very light finger pressure. It just sort of humanises the inside again after using that wooden tool. I'm now making a little bend outwards with a definite change of direction just below the rim. This will help stabilise the cup when it's being fired in at high temperature and stop it going oval shaped. Finish off with some chamois leather, compressing the rim. Then cut off. Cut off with thin cord rather than with wire when you're throwing off the hump. The next day we're working on the underside, so I want to turn the foot ring of this and finish off cosmetically the outside of the cup itself. The clay is fairly wet still, but that's not a problem when using this type of tool on it, a loop tool. As long as you regularly clear the clay from the tool as you're working and don't let it attach itself back onto the cup. I work on the outside of the cup first and the outside of the foot. and then I work on the foot itself or inside the foot. Keeping clearing that clay out of the tool all the time. And yes, it is possible to knock a hole in the bottom. You're only dealing with clay that's maybe 2 to 3 millimeters thick at most. Notice I use both hands on the tool as I work to keep things steady. A little bit of finishing off on the outside, now I've done the inside. Removing any sharp edges and just rounding things and compressing things a little bit with chamois leather. And a few light taps and it's removed from the wheel head. It's a very mysterious process for a beginner. I think most people, when they try and roll out clay, end up with something very lumpy or square rather than something that's round and even. There's a lot of subtle things going on with finger pressure and so on, and it really does take practice. It's quite funny with potting, some of the most easy looking things are some of the most difficult. Using some wire to cut handle length pieces. And each piece will be shaped rather like a carrot with a thin end and a thick end, and the ends are slightly rounded with the fingers. I take hold of the thin end first and slap things down, and then the thick end and slap things down. Gives me a flat, well compressed side and a nicely curved side there, which I'm now compressing with a almost dry sponge. I'm now going to scratch the cup at the points where the handle's going to be attached. I'm using a metal kidney which has got a serrated edge to it. It's a really quick way of scratching into clay. I dip the metal serrated kidney in water just before using it, which put water onto the cup to form a slurry which acts as a glue when you're attaching the handle. Fingers on the inside, thumb on the outside joining, top attachment first. And I've used my maker's mark there to help attach the bottom part of the handle. And now I'm running my fingers around the top attachment there, just finishing it off. And I put a bit of a curve into the handle to make it more question mark shaped rather than just a C shape. And then the cups are left to dry rim downwards.